So, honest question, Tom, Franz. Do you like the way Birkenstock sandals look like?
It's one of those where through the process of doing this research, and I think just them being around a lot more, they've really grown on me. But I would say, if I was honest, it's really only through kind of learning a lot more through the brand. And it's incredible what the background and history and culture of a brand can make you change your perception.
Yeah, super easy answer from my side. I like them when others wear them, like when some people wear them, and I just can't bear the look of them on my feet.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's so personal in my opinion. Like it either like is the best fashion item for some person, or it's like a complete miss. And for me, it's just I don't know. I just can't look at myself wearing Birkenstocks. But I've seen a lot of people, like especially the first one, the Madrid thing on ladies looks really good on some people, and the Arizona on men looks really good on some people, but also on some it's like just it doesn't fit. And for me, it doesn't fit, unfortunately, because I would love them to fit.
Mm, yeah, I'm there. I'm with both of you. Like it when I saw them for the first time, it was like, oh, that's like something my parents would wear, and that's something my parents did wear. That also makes it harder, to fall in love. But then at a certain point, I think it just like, took a turn with some of new silhouettes and just they became cool. So yeah, I think I'm not like in love with them, but I also do like them. Um, and at Tom, I think it's also a lot about doing the research and having friends who wear them and so on. But one other thing we have to clear up before we go into this episode is how do we pronounce this company's name? So first, Tom, you should go ahead with the UK version. So how do you pronounce the company's name? And then Franz will give us the correct one.
I was going to say, Franz, there's a couple of names that you might need to assist with in this episode. I mean, I've been saying a Birkenstock, although obviously, if you're a cool Gen Z, you call them Birks. But yeah, Birkenstock.
No.
Alen, how do you do it?
I'll just let Franz go.
No. Okay, I'll stand with Tom now and make you do it, Alen.
Birkenstock?
That's close.
Close,
So
right?
there are
Yeah.
two. There is the I in the Birk and then the S in the Stock, which can be mistakes. So it's Birkenstock in
Ash.
German.
Okay.
Okay.
Birkenstock, of course.
Just full disclosure, I'm not going to be trying to pronounce it like that throughout this episode. Sorry, Franz.
But another cliffhanger. There's actually one find that I made in the research that only a German-speaking person can explain to you. So I'm very sure that you didn't have this find in your research.
Not Burge wollte es gehen? Is that the one?
No.
Okay, good.
But I like how you tried.
Alrighty. I mean, as you can see, dear listeners, we are diving into Birkenstock company today. So what we do in this episode is we take a darling of a design community, a company, a service, a product that design community generally loves, and we take a look at the business side of that very product or company. And yeah, that's why it's called Teardowns. So Tom, you're gonna start with a little bit of the history and why we love the brand, right?
Yeah, and like I say, this is a brand that my love levels have gone from, I would say, 5-10% to like 90% in the course of this research. So did not think I would be coming into this podcast as such a fanboy, but I'm really sorry. That's kind of how it's played out. So yeah, in today's teardown, we're stepping into the world of footwear for the first time. Tearing down a brand that's been around for over 2 centuries, which blows my mind. I had no idea they've been around that long. Well, more than,
That's the oldest company we've covered, right?
That was going to be one of my questions. Is this the oldest company? I guess.
I think so.
Yeah, no one comes close, I don't think. So yeah,
no
record to be broken maybe in future.
And I think this company, Birkenstock, calls themselves the oldest startup on earth.
Do
Did you see that?
they? No, I didn't see that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that because we're going to get into that, but a lot of their actually a lot of their philosophy and approach that they've had for, you know, a couple of centuries is actually quite contemporary. A lot of the stuff around sustainability and controlled growth and stuff, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, this brand has survived massive shifts in culture and taste, enjoyed the sort of rise and fall of countless fashion trends. But amazingly, for me, the core product, the sort of materials and the company philosophy really hasn't changed very much at all during that time. That might be changing based on some events from the last few weeks. We'll see how that affects things. But yeah, on the whole, a couple of 100 years of really sticking to their guns. So, you know, one of the reasons I really admire them, and we'll get into that. But yeah, this is a brand famous for being sort of unapologetically about functionality of its products, right? And because of that, and because they're a fashion product that is very functional, they've always really split opinion. So I guess why you asked that question at the beginning, right, Alan? Because we have this expression in England of things being like Marmite. You either love them or hate them. Marmite's like this yeast spread thing. And I think people generally aren't on the fence when it comes to a brand like Birkenstock. So yeah, some people will call it designs like a timeless classic. Others are like, they're downright ugly, wouldn't be seen dead in them. And I've gone from that camp into the classic camp in the space of a few days. So
I need to jump in here because that just reminds me of my first experience with Birkenstocks. You know when this was? It was primary school.
Primary school. Okay.
So my mom bought me Birkenstocks, and then mysteriously I lost them. And for the
Franz
people who
just used
didn't
air
see,
quotes, yeah.
and for the people who are listening to this and not watching this, I used air quotes because obviously I purposefully, I don't know, lost them because they were like the most uncool, let's say, yeah, uncool sandals that somebody could wear at school, because that was the purpose of this, right? So you would go to primary school, you couldn't go there with your usual shoes, but you had to wear sandals inside. And my mom wanted to do something good for me, bought Birkenstocks.
Good man.
Back
It's healthy.
in the 19s, I think, yeah, only Kate Moss back in the days also had the same taste as I had.
You and Kate Moss. I mean, you know,
I hated them.
You hated them.
Yeah,
I can understand that. I mean, that was it's tough. Turning up at the playground is something you hate. And were many of your school friends wearing them, or were you just, you know, trendsetting?
I don't know. I can't remember. It was just the boring version of everything. Like teachers would wear them. You wouldn't want to wear them. So that reminded me of your love going from 5% to 90%. I don't know what you said, but for me it was like minus 90%.
God, we can all remember those items that we had to wear for school. I remember my mum forcing me to wear this like sheepskin coat. I looked like a used car dealer. I absolutely hated it. I think I tried to throw it into a hedge, but didn't have Birkenstocks. I mean, now you'd be the drippiest kid in the playgrounds. Like everyone would be
especially with some cool color like bright yellow, neon yellow. That would be dope.
Sure. They were dark blue.
Mate, I think you could still pull that off. We'll get him some ordered on the DMBA account.
That's also the most boring color. But anyhow, yeah, that's how my story with the brand started. Without knowing it was actually a brand, I just thought it was like ugly sandals.
Oh, now you know, now you're learned. You know, you wish you had them back. But yeah, these sandals, they've graced the feet of everyone from students to little Franz to A-list celebrities and definitely designers. I think definitely become a bit of a West Coast thing the last few years, and obviously they're just everywhere now. So yeah, and this is a brand that's been making shoes since 1774. Like we already said, this is probably, well, it's definitely the oldest brand we've ever done a teardown for. So yeah, next question was going to be, and I mean, Franz has already answered this question, but maybe there's more recent history, was have either of you ever owned a pair of Birkenstocks? And if not, what put you off? And if yes, what do you love about them? So, Franz, since your difficult childhood with your mum forcing you to wear sandals to school, have you been an owner since then?
I haven't. I actually really wanted to. So I had a friend who wore them with pride, and I think also wore them with utmost style. So it was really perfect for him. So I tried them on, and I was like, yeah, no, just doesn't fit. So that was the end of the very. It was a very, quick end to my story with Birkenstock.
What put you off though? Like when you looked in the mirror with them on, was it the feel? Was it you just felt like you looked out of place in them? What was it?
Yeah, I think it's just I can't even explain. But yeah, feeling out of place is maybe the closest explanation for that.
Right. Okay. Alen, what about you?
Yeah, I knew you were gonna ask this, so I brought my
Hey, so
Arizona
Arizona's.
here.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, there is some hair in them.
So what do you love about your Arizonas? They look like they've had some good wear. So yeah, what made you first buy them? What is it that you clearly I'm not going to project and say you love them, but they look like they've had a good amount of wear.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, so as I said before, for a good portion of my life, I didn't find them attractive, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna wear this. But then there was this like moment 7, 8 years ago where at that time my girlfriend bought I think it's called Gizer, the silhouette.
The sort of more like a flip flop or a thong if you're Australian, that kind of
just
shape.
like one. Yeah, and that looked amazing. And then I just kind of started to change the perception of the brand and so on, and I started to get into functional wear myself. So when summer was coming up a few years back and I needed the sandals, and I was just close to a store with Birkenstocks, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's see what the hype is about. And like I don't have a lot of emotions to the sandals itself. Like I think they're good, they're functional. I love wearing them, even like in our apartment building when I need to go down and like pick up post the packages and so on, because it's super easy to put on. Even now, like it's winter already almost, and I have my socks on and I can just still put my foot in the sandals. The same thing in the summer, it's just super convenient. They are durable. I don't love the look of them, to be honest, but I think like they fit with everything just good enough so you can put them on and just wear them. But in the process of the research, I figured out, oh, maybe I just went with the wrong color or something. So I am considering a post-research purchase for next summer. But that would be the rubber version, because I need something for the beach,
Right. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. I'm sure we might get into some of the moves that they've made product wise, because that one felt a little uncomfortable to me, actually, the whole move into rubber stuff, but is what it is. Question for you, because a lot of my research, I was kind of reading reviews and watching reviews of them, and people said that the breaking in process is hellish, like blister central. How did you find breaking them in? Did you notice it was like difficult or painful?
It was super smooth. No trouble. I mean, honestly, I don't remember. It was like 4 or 5 years ago, but if I don't remember, then probably, that was fine for me.
Problem.
Yeah. I know they're selling two different types of like like the how is it called? The footbeds. So one is for narrow feet and one is for the regular feet, I think they call it. So maybe it was also like that's what could be the problem with some of these people who are trying to break into it. But no issue for me. So am I understanding this correctly that I'm the only one with Birkenstocks in this call now?
Yeah, I really want some now, but the problem is I have some sandals made by Clark's that are very, very similar to an Arizona that I really only wear on holiday, and I can't justify like buying another pair of sandals when I already have some. So maybe when they wear out, I'll get some. But yeah, I would like a pair. They do look great and sound really comfy. So yeah,
There's still,
not
still time,
not
Tom. Yeah.
still time. But so yeah, you still might be listening to this thinking, Birkenstocks though, aren't those, you know, the ugly sandals that my hippie art teacher used to wear? Hardly a design or business icon. And yeah, like we've said, I definitely held that opinion until quite recently. Yeah, what's the fuss about? It's a sandal, right? But the more I've delved into the design philosophy and the business story, this is one of those brands, a bit like, kind of feels a bit like Aesop to me, that I've really come to admire, particularly when it comes to their sort of philosophy on sustainability and controlled sort of slower growth, which, you know, pretty admirable given how popular they are, and they could be, you know, probably much bigger than they are, but we'll definitely get into that a little later. Because those kind of attributes are things that feel like contemporary startups try to live. And this is an old shoemaker that's been like taking this shit seriously for centuries, right? So a lot to learn from them. So yeah, do have a newfound respect. And I think one of the reasons we're featuring them today is because they are experiencing a wave at the moment, right? We've kind of alluded to the fact that 2022, 2023, you started seeing them everywhere. And that feels really connected to this sort of post-COVID comfort trend, where things like Crocs, comfy joggers, dad shoes, right? Like New Balance, which I'm a big fan of, are all very much in fashion at the moment, right? And these are not instantly like aesthetically pleasing products. But yeah, from what I understand, Birkenstock is one of the most purchased fashion brands of 2022, particularly with Gen Z. They seem to be, you know, really having a moment there, particularly the Boston clog. I don't know if you're familiar with that silhouette. Yeah.
It's
not
the
one
one
I
that
could
like,
imagine having.
yeah,
Close
that
one, right?
Yeah, the closed one. Yeah,
That's
fully
the
enclosed.
worst for me.
That's the one that like my grandparents wear around the house when they
Right.
went out. So that's what I associate with it. And I just can't imagine wearing this to like, I don't know, going out or something. It just feels like it's around the house sandal.
Well, I have to say, since kind of learning about that silhouette, I've noticed, like, I've got an office in a co-working space, and I saw about 5 pairs the other day. I was like, shit, like I'd not really noticed how many of these are out there, right? So it's one of those where once you learn about it and realize how much of a wave they're on, you realize they're everywhere. Not so much in England at the moment because the weather is terrible, but yeah, people are wearing them around the office even the last week.
But if you want to wear Birkenstocks when it's raining, then Boston is the way to go, right?
Yes, yeah, sure. Closed toes, definitely. But yeah, very much, I think the instant silhouette that comes to mind is things like the Arizona, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about the design detail of, because I think when people think of Birkenstock, they think of that classic one that Alen, if you're watching on YouTube, held up, the kind of double strap leather, probably a design that's been unchanged for many decades. But yeah, what really sets Birkenstock apart, regardless of the model that you're working with, is comfort, this absolute focus on comfort. So we're going to dig a little bit more into the design and the materials that have sort of made them famous, really. So at first glance, they might not strike you as this sort of design marvel, but like most things design related, the real kind of beauty and innovation is sort of beneath the surface. And the Arizona is that sort of hero product. And like I say, probably the one that comes to mind. So from the top, the Arizona's buckles are made from this like really, the straps made from this very, very high quality leather. And then it's got these sort of embossed buckles that say Birkenstock on. I don't know if it's split across both buckles. Is it like Birken and then Stock? You've got one.
No,
there,
it's
No, pretty sure it's the same.
The same on both.
Yeah, same on both. Yeah.
And that's made from this sort of enameled. Oh, look at those extreme close up. Ah, yeah.
Sorry, it's not the most.
No, it's fine. I implore people to go on YouTube to have a good look at Alan's shoes.
Or just Google Arizona.
Google Arizona. Yeah, the kind of brown colorway is probably the most common one. But yeah, made from this sort of enameled nickel 3 metal, high quality stuff that keeps it corrosion free. And then there's the famous footbed. So that's the bit that your skin touches. Unless you're a socks and sandals kind of person, no judgment here. I've seen plenty of people much younger than me rocking that look really well. Definitely couldn't do that myself. So the top part of the footbed, that's made from layers of suede, which is the bit that your skin sort of touches immediately, and jute, which is this sort of rough fiber that's kind of woven into these matting. It's made from the stems of like some sort of tropical plant, and then put into this matting that's kind of glued together and molded with the suede. And then the main part of the footbed is where Birkenstock is like unique and probably most famous for its innovation. And that bit's made primarily from cork. So that's like the thick part that goes below the suede and the jute. And that, you know, that's a completely renewable resource that Birkenstock farm themselves. And it's the clever bit is that cork, which I believe is like combined with natural latex, is molded inside to the foot's sort of natural contours. So when you look at a fresh pair, it looks like it's got sort of toes in it and a really pronounced like arch. Yep. But then over time, that footbed sort of molds to the shape of your feet, just subtly, which is where that breaking end period is. And that is the kind of killer feature. That's where it's got this incredible support, because over time it's going to fit you like a glove. So yeah, you said you didn't really notice the breaking in period, but people say that once that footbed has broken in, it is like working on a cloud. It's like it's been absolutely custom made for your feet, which you really don't get with a lot of modern footwear. Yeah, did you find that with them? Have they got more comfortable over time, Alen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, they were comfortable since the beginning, but it is one of those things where it like gets molded to your feet. I mean, I generally find the same process with most of the shoe wear that I have. So I wouldn't say that this like breaking in is so unique. But what is unique is just by default, they are just done in a way that's healthy for your feet. You know, that's what I find super unique about them. And I think I might have a different version. I think I bought the vegan version of Arizona.
Okay.
So it has like different layers, and like the leather on top is not actual leather, but you wouldn't notice that from looking at them, which is also, it's a highly high quality made product. Really cool also.
Yeah, the quality looks like next level. So yeah, these things aren't just about comfort, they're also absolutely built to last. I was like reading stories online of people who've had these things for decades. Like there was a dude who had these Arizonas for like 25, 30 years or something like that, which is insane. Although, have you, in the UK, we have this sitcom called Only Fools and Horses. I don't know if you've heard of it. Very famous in the UK.
Never heard of it.
Only Fools and Horses. It's like classic comedy from the 70s, 80s, 90s. Real British institution. There's a character in it called Trigger, and he's this kind of slightly bumbling friend of the main characters. And there's this sort of famous concept called Trigger's broom, because he's like he works like as a street cleaner or something, and he's having this conversation with the lead characters, and he says, I've had this broom for 20 years. And they're like, really, Trigger? That's amazing. It looks brand new. He's like, yeah. It's had 17 new heads and 14 new handles in its time. And it's like, yeah, it's not the same broom anymore. And I think that's a bit like Birkenstocks as well. You know, people replace the buckles, they replace the soles and stuff. So yeah, they've had them for 20, 25 years, but they've had them, you know, repaired several times. But that's still
this
great,
in itself
right?
is awesome, right? I mean, this is a slipper.
Absolutely awesome.
Like, why would you even repair this in the first place? It's a slipper. But
yeah,
with this construction, it's actually possible. I don't know how many people actually do it, but yeah, it's designed for it to be possible.
And that's great. Like that's one of the things that spoke to me the most about their story and their philosophy. Like these are super sustainable products in a world, in an industry that has really, really contributed to some pretty poor practice when it comes to waste and fast fashion and sustainability. So they're absolutely part of the design is for repairability. It's baked in from the start. And as someone who like increasingly tries to buy good quality items that can last and be repaired, that really speaks to me, which is another reason why I want them. But also I have to kind of live that philosophy and wear out the ones I already have. So yeah, Birkenstock really takes sustainability seriously, and I'm sure that's something we can go into more detail on later. Did either of you watch the behind the scenes factory videos on the Birkenstock YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my days.
So well done, like a proper well done video. Good music. It's really well done.
And also
Really
the
good.
scenes and the, let's say, acting and the same time not acting of these people. Like there is usually it's about also hands and people who do this stuff, right? And then you would just have this one person at this one machine, and they would do stuff, and then they would sit down and look at the camera, not say anything. Just this would be the only move they would do, right?
Or say integrity.
I
Like
really
something.
the only ones I saw is
No.
where they didn't say anything.
No, they didn't. I would just say like that's
It's
the
text
next where
underneath.
you could do like they just look into the camera and say integrity, and then the next person looks at the camera and says honesty. Like
They're so well produced. So I implore you to go and check these out. There's a series called Birkenstock Quality. They're like 2-3 minutes each, like one about the buckle, one about the footbed. There's like a director's cut, which is really good. But yeah, incredibly well produced. And they really showcase that. I'm sorry to lean on stereotypes, but that sort of precise German approach to manufacturing. The factories look really clean. The people look like they take their stuff seriously.
It
really
looks functional, but not too modern.
Totally.
And everything in there is like, it works. It's not high tech. It's functional and efficient.
It really is. And they even apply the brand within the factories in a really like subtle, aesthetically pleasing way. I would love to go and do a tour of that factory. It just looked, really fascinating. And there's still a lot of handmade stuff in that process as well, which I didn't expect.
50 hands, right?
Indeed.
50 steps that need to be done by hand in this production process.
Yeah. And go and check out these videos, because again, it's one of those things that builds in that layer of admiration for me as far as the process. So yeah, that's a manufacturing process that no doubt has changed a fair bit since 1774. So we are going to go back in time to the sort of origin story of Birkenstock. So, what was the problem that Birkenstock were trying to fix with their sort of unique design, those materials that we've talked about, and where did it all start? So I want you to picture this, a small village in Germany called, might need Franz again in a moment. I believe it's called Langenbergheim.
Pretty good.
About right? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Langenbergheim.
Even better. Just east of Frankfurt, probably the nearest like big German city that people might be able to orientate around. And this is where the story begins, with a man named Johann Adam Birkenstock. And Johann was registered in the village as a vassal, which I've learned means like landowner. Is that right? And shoemaker. So yeah, they seem to every article about Johann Birkenstock seems to refer to that title that he had. I don't know if he was like, a rich landowner as well as being like a man of the people shoemaker, but yeah, this word vassal kept coming up. But thought you might know more about that. Doesn't ring a bell. But yeah, Johann wasn't just any shoemaker. He really had a vision. And back in those days, most shoes just had like flat soles. But Johann was really thinking differently about that. He could see the problems with that type of manufacturing, that kind of shape. And he wanted to create shoes that would support and contour the foot, providing comfort, like never before, that people were really not accustomed to. And so like most great innovators, he just went out and did it, right? And he wasn't just looking to create a sort of trendy shoe, which was kind of the thing at the time. He was on this mission to promote foot health. And that's a big part of the kind of early ethos of Birkenstock. And sure, when we fast forward a little later to some of the sort of ergonomic orthopedic learnings that they were putting out there. That was a really important part of kind of the way they promoted their product as well. So yeah, this mission was sort of rooted in understanding the anatomy of the foot and the importance of support for people to have kind of long-term good foot health. And yeah, for context, most shoes of that era were not ergonomic in the slightest. They were designed completely for aesthetics or status or just very rudimentary basic protection. Comfort was like so low down on the list of user needs that were being designed around. And Johan was like, no, we're gonna put that top. So he came up with that idea of those contoured cork footbeds made with those layers of suede and jute. And that would conform to, as we know, the shape of the wearer's feet. And this was a real game changer in the shoe industry. And it set the foundation for what Birkenstock would ultimately become and carry on being. So, you know, fast forward a few generations and the Birkenstock family like kept innovating. And in 1896, Johann's great-grandson, Conrad Birkenstock, developed the first contoured arch support, which is now a product that we sort of take for granted, something you can put into your own shoes. But this, again, was a really big deal, marked a sort of significant milestone in the company's history. But I know we're going to get into that one a little bit later, because really that's where the main story of this brand starts. So Birkenstock brand started with a sort of simple idea in a small German village and has grown to become this sort of global name in footwear. And the nice story is, for me, it's all because Johann Birkenstock dared to think a bit differently about shoes and what was important in them. So that's that line there is a bit of a clue for a quick quiz question. So which design and tech legend was a big Birkenstock fan?
And can it be continued with his pair of Birkenstocks were auctioned for about what, $200,000?
We may or may not be talking about the same person. I didn't pick up on that, but yeah. Do you want to hazard a guess then?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, yeah.
Oh, mate, I mean, this is match made in heaven.
Isn't it just? He was a band of the Birkenstock, Arizona in tan suede. And talking of like functional, user-centered design, and you know, I guess that's what you're talking about, Alen, right? Match made in heaven for Mr. Apple. He also absolutely famously loved New Balance, New Balance 992s in grey. That man's fit, like Birkenstocks and New Balance, he would be so on trend for like 2023.
And just Google, actually, Steve Jobs' original pair of Birkenstocks were auctioned for almost $220,000.
Wow.
That's mad. Yeah. That had passed me by,
Yeah,
actually.
yes, but why?
Why? Yeah, God.
Who
Yeah.
bought it? I mean, did the company try to buy it off of
I
the
didn't
family
even-
so they have it in their museum? Or who would spend
I don't-
220K on old Birkenstocks?
I came across this number that it was like it listed for 80,000, but then it was finally auctioned for 220,000. I did not click on the link and read who bought it because I was just like, yeah, okay.
Let's be
Maybe
honest.
it was sold as an NFT.
Oh, God.
That would explain the price.
It was probably some founder in Berkeley or something, probably framed somewhere in an office in San Francisco. But yeah, Steve Jobs obviously once famously said, "Design is not what it looks and what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." And I think this quote sort of perfectly encapsulates the appeal of Birkenstock sandals for designers. So usually I would say here, like, what is it about a brand that designers love? But I'm not sure with Birkenstock that designers realize that they maybe should love Birkenstock as a design icon. So I would say this is more what I think designers should admire about Birkenstock. But you know, it's up to you. But these are the things that have kind of spoken to me. The first is this sort of timeless design, which I think they completely embody, because the form and the function of these sandals in particular, and they have obviously a much wider range of footwear now, have remained consistent for decades and decades over the years. And I think that really illustrates that well thought out design, design that puts people first, user-centered thinking, can really withstand the test of time, trends. So yeah, I think that's admirable if you can come up with a design that really can last through generations, something most designers sort of dream of. And Oliver Reichert, is that how you pronounce it, the current CEO of Birkenstock? He highlighted this brand commitment by saying, we do not chase trends, we create classics. Yeah. And I think even with new designs that Birkenstock are putting out there, they're really trying to live that kind of timelessness, which I think is great.
The CEO has another line. So in the financial document that came out before they went public, there's one line that I couldn't stop laughing at. And it talks about this philosophy that they have. It's just one of those lines that the company writes because they think it's true, but like to the outsider, it just means like, really? You really wrote that? And it says, Birkenstock is more than a shoe. It's a way of thinking, a way of living.
Okay, that might be pushing things a little. I'm not sure I can get on board with that. But there's a lot of people who really, and they have some kind of cult following, and I can kind of understand that, particularly like in the 60s and 70s. I think, sort of hippie culture, and people probably thought it was a real encapsulation of that belief system and lifestyle. So yeah.
I actually agree with Tom that for these diehard fans, which these brands have created, it's actually true. And I think this is what the long-lasting, I think I agree with you. When reading this, I have to cringe. It's like,
cringe, yeah.
I don't know. But then on the other hand,
think about the brand that you love, it is true, right? Like Apple,
exactly.
like, yeah, it is a way of thinking. Sorry, Franz.
And you know what we also, what this reminds me of? What brand? Muji. We said the same thing about Muji. They tried to create the brand that you can live by. And for Muji, it's maybe a little bit more true because you can buy products for different parts of your life from Muji, right? You can buy it for every part of your living, of your household. For shoes, it's maybe a little bit different because, well, it's sandals. So it's not a way of life. It's just what you wear. But in a way, I think every brand who has this long history and was able to create these diehard fans, for them, it is that way. Yeah, like you can use the value of this brand to live by. But yeah, still for somebody who is not part of this, it reads and feels like, I don't know.
If you're in the tribe, you get it. If you're not in the tribe, you cringe. Exactly. But I agree. You're right. You're totally right. Good point.
Yeah, there's a bit of an ick to it. But I'd say more than most, the values, particularly around sustainability and like being able to make these things last a long time, I can kind of get on board with that. If you are someone who is maybe moving towards that way of thinking, which I think so many of us are, then yeah, Birkenstock is a brand that has lived that for a long time. So yeah, he might be stretching a little, but and it feels a little cringe, but there's some substance to it. Whereas you hear those kind of quotes from other brands and you're just like,
exactly.
BS. So yeah, the next reason I think I admire Birkenstock, and I'm particularly fond of sort of functional aesthetics, sort of utilitarian design. And I think every aspect of their sandal, from the footbed to the buckle, it's designed functionality first. So I think if you appreciate sort of utilitarian design, like Birkenstock is, when it comes to footwear, about as good as it gets. There's a few other brands, but in the kind of sandal world, I don't think there's anyone that really competes. But that obviously has its downside, and I think that's where this kind of ugly kind of reputation has come from. And I saw this review on thingtesting.com that I thought was like tickled me. This person who loves them was like, they're great, but yeah, they're a little bit granola ugly. But that's kind of part of their charm, right? And the granola ugly is really because like historically they've aligned with a sort of slightly hippie vibe. We'll get on to where these things were originally sold, and it was definitely alongside stacks of granola. So but yeah, the brand's emphasis on that sort of foot health and ergonomics, sort of exemplifies that user-centric design. Their products aren't just about aesthetics. They really, really prioritize users' well-being. And, you know, as a sort of user-centered designer, like, find that something very admirable. They've stuck to their guns. Next thing for me is this sort of customization and personalization aspect. You know, we've already talked about the fact these sandals naturally adapt to the wearer's foot shape over time. And that really creates a very unique product experience. Not everyone, but a lot of owners, that makes them become extremely attached to that pair. You know, you have contributed almost towards the design a little bit in some way, and you build this kind of relationship with the product, which is something that designers would love to get with their own work, you know, where someone feels this kind of real, some people have a real like emotional attachment to their pair. And that's very rare, but the fact that it is so unique to you is really interesting. So yeah, that aspect I think is quite fascinating.
The interesting thing is that this already starts with buying. So it already starts with buying it by having such a basic product. Like basically they have, it feels like they have 3 models, right? I know that they have maybe 6, but it feels like they have 3 models. But then you have the real leather vegan version and rubber version. Then you have the brown. You have, I don't know how many different colors. You have I don't know how many different uppers, like the shiny upper, the more leather-wise upper, the rubber upper. So you can basically, you have one product, but it is so customizable by the many variations you can buy it from. So you can start with being part of a family, but still buying something that's very unique if you want. And then over time, you make it yours by, molding your own foot into it.
Did you come across, sorry, don't go ahead.
No, go on, Alen.
You were mentioning how many sandals or products they have. Did you come across how many silhouettes or like shoes the company has?
Apparently it's hundreds, right? Like
700.
Yeah.
700, but there are 5 that bring in 75% of the revenue.
Mm.
So most people know them for Arizona, Madrid, Boston, Gizeh, and Miami, something like this. So these are the top 5. Everybody knows them for these 5. But actually, there's 700 silhouettes. They don't call them shoes; they call them silhouettes.
And that's like a model, right?
Yeah, that's a model.
So that I can get my Arizona in 17 variations. Does that count to that, or is it actual like real different models?
Let me double check on this, and I can come back to you, Franz. As always, you have great questions. I didn't double check this exact thing. But
I saw a similar thing though.
I would be super amazed, because for me, actually, both could be true, but for me, it feels like they have like, it feels like, now let's not talk about their shoes, because they also have like closed shoes, but let's talk about their sandals. They have like, it feels like they have 5 sandals, but you can get them in a trillion variations.
Yeah. So I'm just reading this, and it says, okay, over 700 silhouettes by extending our existing silhouettes and launching new styles. So this reads like, yeah, even within maybe one sandal, there are different silhouettes of that very sandal.
When they say silhouette, they usually do mean a different shape though. Like in kind of footwear parlance, like a silhouette is very much like you would recognize a difference in shape rather than a color.
But at the same time, they do say our top 5 silhouettes. So maybe, and then they talk about this 5 being Madrid, Arizona, and so on. So
okay, I'm completely amazed. I didn't think they had so many different.
I mean, a lot of them are probably
versions,
rubbish.
Models.
A lot of them are probably really not very good. If they've got 700, that's probably makes sense that 5 or 6 are the most popular. But yeah, quite the back catalogue if they wanted to start, you know, pushing other models. A lot of opportunity out there. So yeah, I was going to mention sustainability. I feel like I've already mentioned that a few times, but I think designing a product with sustainability at the center, particularly when it comes to physical product design, I think something we need to move towards so much. Like, how can we make things repairable and replaceable, and people take a bit more ownership over keeping these things in the world for longer, rather than creating something new. Absolute, case study for that kind of thinking, and not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, if you that really resonates with me. And the natural materials, right? They're using very sustainable stuff like cork, which they grow themselves, that is taken, stripped off the bark of the tree and grows back. Obviously they're moving towards synthetic leathers and things. So yeah. And then finally, I think probably the biggest one is the sort of broad appeal. These sandals have universal appeal. They're worn by everyone, from like little Franzes to teenagers to older people. And it feels to me like a showcase of inclusive design. Anyone can wear them, any age, can usually pull them off. You're either wearing them for fashion or you're wearing them for comfort. The only maybe audience that maybe they're not so good for, I loved this review I saw on Amazon. Shout out to Manhattan Mama 100,021, who said maybe they're not for introverts. She said they're not for introverts because they are always noticed, and people ask, where did you get them? So they're definitely a conversation
like in a
starter.
negative way.
Yeah, maybe this was a few years ago. Nowadays people would be like, oh, where'd you get those? But
yeah,
I think if when they're not in fashion, if you're rocking some Birkenstocks, people might be like, where the hell are they from? So yeah. Question, anything you kind of love or have learned to love about Birkenstock from a sort of design perspective through your own research, or any of those that particularly speak to either of you?
An aspect or a product?
Either, really. I was thinking about an aspect, like whether there was something around their design philosophy or any of the things that I've talked about that maybe particularly spoke to you, whether it's sustainability or utilitarian design, or yeah, just anything about the design aspects that that maybe through your research has really kind of jumped out to you.
I like the being true to values. And I like a few more things, or I mentioned, I realized a few more things, but I'm going to keep that to for later because I needed to make a point. But
yes,
yeah,
here
this like
also.
long-lasting values and just staying true to something is yeah, it's admirable. I really like that.
Yeah, totally.
And their approach to manufacturing is also highly, highly admirable. But I won't go into this because I know Franz is going to cover this in detail because it's a huge part of the strategy. And I think also one thing to point out here is this like family business and how those are being run differently from VC-backed businesses. Like this is as extreme as you can get in terms of approach to the business. So the family-run business, you go slow, you go with your own revenue, you basically just try to focus on survival. You try to slowly and sustainably grow, try to be the best at something, versus VC-backed money, just like, oh, we have tons of cash, let's just burn it all and try to see if we can become the next big thing. If not, nobody cares, or at least our investors don't care. Despite a lot of the ideas that are backed by VC investors would make sense if they were just family-run small businesses. So I love a story of a family business being so true to the values and at the right time, in the right place to also experience the success of a brand that is usually today associated with like, oh, that could only be done with VC money. It did take them 200 years longer, but it's just built on the right foundations.
Absolutely. Echo. Yeah, co-sign all of that, Alen.
Took them only 200 years longer.
Yeah.
So it just needs a little patience.
Just a little patience. But it's not like the family was struggling for the last 200 years. So that's a big point also to say, right? So I'm sure the family was just fine for the last 150 years. So yeah.
I agree. So let's go back there again. And Tom, I'm sorry already now because some of my research has a little different results from your research.
Okay.
Because what I found out is that Johann Birkenstock was actually doing nothing else than building regular shoes for almost 100 years. So this, founded in 1774, was, yes, it was a Birkenstock, but what this first 2 generations of Birkenstocks did was what every other shoemaker would do. They just built shoes in their regular shop. And that was so interesting for me, that this company built on a history. They said they're founded in 1774. But basically, until more than 100 years later, they were just a regular shoemaking shop, like every other shoemaking shop.
So they were making,
and only, sorry, go on.
They were making flat-shoed, aesthetically pleasing status shoes for the longest time. And I do appreciate that the construction that we sort of touched on came a little later. I didn't realize it was so long that they were going before they sort of found that innovation.
I don't even know for whom they made shoes. So this is just part of also the Birkenstock story, and also how they tell the story. So I don't know if this Johann Birkenstock made now shoes that were more aesthetically pleasing for like higher income groups, or if it just was like the shoemaker of the town living a modest life, and producing shoes for the people who needed shoes that were kind of in walking distance, or like horsing distance. Sorry for the cliches.
So, I guess hard to find a lot of probably
good
not
data.
A lot of records, not a lot of good data for cobblers in 1770s, the darkest Germany.
But apparently it took until 1896-ish, and Johann's great grandson to, let's say, invent this ergonomic and flexible insole that was contoured to the feet. So it took more than 100 years, the first more than 100 years, to actually get from a shoemaker to the invention that Birkenstock is now basically grounded on. So this Conrad Birkenstock actually, invented this foot sole, or this insole that was flexible, that was contoured, and looked like similar to how footbeds look now. And important or interesting thing for me is that he didn't create shoes with this. So he was basically only one part of the value chain, which was creating these insoles, and he was selling it to other companies who made then footwear from it. So actually made these shoes.
So the company or the family went from making shoes to making the insoles at this point.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So were they not? Did they not have that ergonomic? Did the ergonomic focus then only come when the insoles came?
Exactly.
Because I thought that they'd had this sort of philosophy for a while, and then it came into the insole. But yeah, maybe not. Though it sounds like that it was just when the insole kind of started.
That's how I read it. Yeah, I mean, it took them a while, I guess, to get this idea, but this invention of this flexible insole that is contoured to the feet was in 1896, more than 100 years later than the company was actually founded. And then it took another 5 years until 1902 that this product got refined to be possible to use in factory production. So we're just in industrial revolution, right? So shoes are also starting to get produced in factories. So in 1902, this insole is actually also refined to work for factory-made shoes. And from this time on, Conrad Birkenstock actually spent his whole lifetime in perfecting these insoles. So he really focused on, and he had a passion, or maybe I guess it was even an obsession, to create these healthy insoles. And on the way, he kind of invented orthopedic shoes. So we really need to understand that before this whole thing, as you said, Tom, it was like a shoe was not like a shoe for us. It was all stiff, it was all flat. And Birkenstock actually was convinced that shoes that people wear have huge impact on health and well-beings of humans, and that he wanted to create something that helps people walk like intended by nature. And he created these insoles, and he was hired by hospitals and rehabilitation centers to manufacture like custom orthopedic shoes for wounded World War I soldiers. He engaged in training of other shoemakers. So he was the, like, say, the person who taught other shoemakers how to create these healthy versions of shoes. And in 1913, he finally found the best material combination for that. And that was the cork and latex combination. So it took another, let's say, 20 years from the first idea of the let's make contoured insoles to actually also finding the right material for that. And that was, yes, as I said, in 1913, this combination of cork and latex.
I had no idea that latex, this is right, horrible to admit, was a natural product. I don't know, that it sounds like a brand name or something. So when I learned that it was a combination of latex and cork, I'm like, oh, that's not very sustainable. But yeah, turns out latex is like from the gum of trees, right? Like you sort of extract it.
I had exactly the same, and this was even before this research, but I had exactly the same feeling or notion of latex. Like, just sounds like some technological textile.
Sounds like Lycra or something, right?
Yeah,
Which is a brand name. But so yeah,
it
every
just
day's a
sounds
school day
artificial
when you're researching for a teardown.
Yeah.
And without knowing this, you just gave me the perfect segue for something that's exactly the opposite. So you just said latex doesn't sound like a real thing. It sounds like an invention, like a product. Okay. So to understand the significance of this invention, we also need to understand that with this new product, a word was invented, and the word is footbed. The word footbed, or Fußbett in German, did not exist before that. Like,
makes sense.
Konrad Birkenstock actually registered the word Fußbett with his invention of this new insole. And that was for me a mind-blowing moment. That was exactly the opposite that you just described with latex. I was like, Fußbett, this is like footbed is a word that is like, I don't know, it's like tree. It's a word. It has always been there. But no, it wasn't.
It's not one that I had come across before. Like, I have to confess, it sounds like footbed. I've always thought of like sole, like the sole of a shoe rather than footbed. So it's actually a new one on me. But yeah, like you say, had no idea that was that he'd invented that term and sort of.
And that's why I think it's much more understandable for a German-speaking person, because Fußbett for me is like the most natural word ever.
Really?
If you translate it to footbed, I guess it's weird, right? But that's how German language work. You just take two words and stick it together, and then it's a word.
Very
and
logical.
it feels like super natural. Like Fußbett, I thought this was a word all my life.
Sometimes you take 4 or 5 words and put them together, right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
also happens. I'm just happy it's just 2 short words. It's not 5 long ones.
Yeah, I was blown away that actually, 1913, with the invention of this cork and latex insole, Konrad Birkenstock also registered the word Fußbett, which was the birth of actually the current Birkenstock shoe. But apparently, there wasn't a shoe yet, right?
No, right?
Because until 1960s, when Karl Birkenstock actually wanted more and became frustrated that they were just one part of the value chain, Birkenstock only created insoles. They didn't create shoes. So the founder, Johann Birkenstock, he was actually a cobbler and created shoes. But then for the whole half of a century, Birkenstock was only creating these insoles, and then sometimes helped to create these custom-made one-by-one orthopedic shoes for like injured soldiers, for example. So as I said, in 1960s, Karl Birkenstock, now the son of Konrad Birkenstock, the inventor of this insole, he became frustrated, and he basically thought it was just like a shame that nobody saw the product. Nobody knows that it actually existed. So in 1963, they created the first sandal ever made, and that was the Madrid model. So it took them until 1963 to actually create their first sandal, their first shoe.
And do you know why it's called Madrid? Because I would expect from a German company for it to be called Berlin or Munich or...
No idea. Do you know?
No, neither.
Oh.
Just like
The Madrid is the one strap
Yeah.
sandal, right?
Yeah.
The Arizona is the two. I was reading about apparently wearing Madrid. Basically,
I think we lost Tom for a second.
But it's because it's only got this one strap and it's quite forward. It means you have to have your foot in this sort of claw configuration a lot of the time to keep it stable. And apparently that really helps strengthen your ankle and your calves. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if it was intentional.
Yeah. I read the same thing, but I didn't come across why the model is called Madrid. What I found interesting when I saw this was, why a sandal? Like, like why on earth you're doing insoles for shoes for half a century, and then you bring the first product on the market? Why are you creating a sandal?
It's a good point. Yeah.
And I think this was really because of the pride of the maker of this product, that he wanted visibility. So now this is just a wild guess, right? So I just think that this company for 50 years tried to make, or even now 60 years, tried to create the perfect insoles. And what they wanted to do is create better life, create a healthy life, create shoes that were that are basically good for people. And they thought and still think that the sole is the most important thing when it comes to the quality of walking. And then it kind of makes sense for you to create something where your core product, which is the insole, is visible.
That's a very good point. And I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. Yeah.
And I don't know if actually it worked already this way, but this principle of visibility is actually something that there is a lot of talk about even in innovation management, right? So you know why cable of iPods is white.
Yeah, because no other headphones were white, so they wanted to make it visible for other people when you're wearing them that this is iPhone, that this is a different product.
And if you bought your iPod and you had it in your pocket, nobody else would see that you actually had this iPod. But if you had the white strings, then people would see it. So this visibility aspect in innovation is something that's super, super important. And I don't know if this was like an, let's say, innovation management founded decision. I doubt it, because this was all done by Clayton Christensen in the, I don't know.
Maybe it was McKinsey involved. You don't know.
Yeah. So Clayton Christensen did his research much later on his work on innovation management. But I think this visibility is a pretty cool decision, or pretty nice small detail when it came to why they actually created a sandal. So they made their insoles visible. Cool. Small detour. How was this product positioned? It was a healthy shoe. It was in close collaboration with doctors. They would be the ones promoting it. So they were still basically coming from their heritage of orthopedic shoes that were treating conditions. And yes, they wanted to go broader so that general public would also wear it and benefit from the upsides of walking like nature intended. But the direction they entered this market was clearly from a health perspective. And yeah, that was the 60s, first product. And the next big thing happened in 1966, actually by accident, and actually very closely related to their health focus. In 1966, they entered the US market. And that was done completely by accident. And I'm sure that both of you have stumbled over this story. So you can also help me tell the story. I'll start with Margaret Fraser. Anybody knew Margaret Fraser before?
No.
Not before. No. Bit of a ledge there.
Me neither, but it sounded like a celebrity name in a way, Margaret Fraser. So
Yeah.
actually, Margaret Fraser is a German-American designer, dressmaker, and she suffered from chronic foot pain, went back to Germany to do rehabilitation, went into a spa, and in this spa, the doctors and health workers gave her Birkenstock sandals. And she fell in love with them because apparently it relieved her chronic foot pain. And she was so amazed by the shoe that she decided that she wants to bring the product to the US. And that's an interesting story. Like, you need to be kind of famous and also kind of a get things done person to experience a product in Germany, call up Karl by the time, Karl Birkenstock, saying, look, I know that you're currently active in Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, and I know that you're like focusing on healthy shoes, but I think you should sell this product in the US. And maybe you don't want to do it, but I would actually be eager to do this. And then maybe Karl would ask, okay, are you like doing anything with shoes? Do you have any retail experience? And then she would be like, no, I don't. I just wore them. I love them. And I think they have a real market there. And then Karl says, sure, we can try.
I loved her vibe. Like, yeah, she sounds great. Yeah, when I learned about her and her story.
That ended up being a great decision, by the way. Do you know like the split of the revenue by market?
Isn't it that they have like more than or almost 50% of their sales in the US?
I thought it was 70 something. Oh, right, no, 55. Okay.
55.
Yeah, it's US. So that's, yeah, whenever you see a company having larger market share, like especially a German company, which is having the German company with such a long history being in Germany and Europe, I would expect to have a bigger market share in Europe than in the US. But no, 55% compared to 35 in Europe, which means that together US and Europe is 90%. So it's mostly just Europe and US product.
Yeah. And in hindsight, this was one of the key decisions, but it's not even, in my opinion, it's not even a decision, right? Somebody came to them, Margaret Fraser said, hey, I have an entrepreneurial mindset. Let me bring these shoes to the US. And you're just like, sure, why not? I mean, what do I have to lose? That's completely not my market. If it doesn't work, I don't care. I have a good business here. So let's just try it out. And I'm just like amazed by first the entrepreneurial spirit of Margaret Fraser. Secondly, by the let's just try attitude of Karl Birkenstock, and by the fact that it actually worked out, even though it didn't look like it would work out, right?
Not in the beginning, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So Margaret Fraser comes back to the US, wants to sell this into shoe stores, and shoe stores are telling her, no, like this is ugly. Nobody will buy that. And the last resort that she actually thought of was going into health stores, health food stores, actually. So this is the Reformhaus, the stores that Oatly started to sell their product to. So just think back of our Oatly episode. That was where Oatly was also listed. So you'd maybe find, so you could have found Oatly and Birkenstock next to each other. Well, you couldn't because Oatly was in Europe and Birkenstock was now in the US. But just as a, let's say, picture with words, no shoemaker, no shoe store would actually, no department store would actually list them, but only the health food stores would list them because they would be close to the other products that were health focused and, let's say, wellness focused. And then the next, let's say, complete coincidence happened, and I still believe that this has nothing to do with let's say, actual decision making, was that in the 1970s there was hippie culture coming up, and they were looking for symbols of counterculture, like symbols of that were basically showing them that they would not comply with what the general public would enjoy. And they somehow chose Birkenstock Arizona sandal as the statement against the mainstream, because by then in 1973 also Arizona was invented. So Arizona was basically boosted in the US by hippie culture, and that was basically their first appearance in pop culture. And with hippie culture becoming more mainstream, Birkenstocks also became something that normal people would like to wear. And eventually in 1986, the first department store, Nordstrom, would list them. And there are, again, awesome timeline things here. So first, in the 60s, they would come to the US. Then it would take them 10 years to kind of be picked up by hippie culture. Another 10 years to be listed by Nordstrom. And in between 1973, the Arizona would be launched, which is the exact same model that Alen just put into the camera a few minutes ago. So Arizona model, Arizona silhouette, as they call it, was launched in 1973.
It's been enduring a while. It's a long time. Footwear does tend to be unusual in that things can remain pretty popular for a long time. You think about something like Nike silhouettes and things like that, but they're like typically considered more aesthetically pleasing, more objectively aesthetically pleasing. For something that is so functional and like considered ugly to endure that long is pretty nuts.
Yeah, true. Then 1990s. Now we are in 1990s. Actually, also the time period that apparently is, let's say, created the Gen Z's love for Birkenstocks because they were so popular in the 1990s. The first relationship with high fashion started because Kate Moss wore Birkenstocks on one of the photo sessions. In 1992, Birkenstock actually had their first appearance at a fashion show. Young designer called Marc Jacobs would bring them in, and the story goes like this, that the poor dude was actually fired after that. So it was still, yeah, it wasn't really, let's say, mass accepted yet, but you saw that kind of there was something that was appealing to high fashion in this product. And in the 2000s, the comfy actually got in style. So we had Uggs, track suits, and all that along with Birkenstocks became cool. So comfortable actually became cool. And since then, there was loads of collaborations with renowned labels like Celine, Valentino, Manolo Blahnik, or Rick Owens. So somehow this granola brand was able to establish a relationship with high fashion.
They should do a collab with Oatly.
How much intention do you think was in that?
What, in the collaboration space?
No, in the in 1970s, did anybody think that this would be a fashion item? Like from within the company?
It reads to me like a lot of these things just happened to the company. They didn't really actively look for, oh, we need to go into this subculture. We need to now become more famous or be used and worn by pop stars. But when it happened, they were also not super quick to grab onto it and exploit it or overexploit it. And that just made it more organic. I think now the company is in the stage where it's like actively trying to, oh, we want to be in that space. We want to do these things. But up until that point, it just felt like because the company was built on good, strong foundations, and it was profitable. It had enough money. It didn't have to like overextend. It didn't want to overextend, and it was just pleased with having a stable business. And if anyone actually picks it up, great. But we're not gonna do a damn thing about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it was an intentional thing, no. And I think that's what makes it probably resonate more. Like there's an authenticity to it. It's not a brand trying to push themselves into a space. And I think we've seen that a lot over the years, where a culture will adopt a particular product or a brand or a look. You just think, where's that come from? And I'm sure the brands are taken by surprise as well. And it doesn't feel so cheesy or kind of forced. So yeah, they definitely, I think what you're alluding to is they definitely could have capitalized on that way more than they did at the time. You're probably going to come onto it, but yeah, definitely done that more now.
No, I think so too. I think the reason why it works so well now is that they didn't do anything about it for a very long time. So that they actively were like you can only be counterculture if you're not culture, right? You can only be this this weird thing that that creates a lot of buzz if you are actually positioned on the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, let's get to this a little later. Now we're in the 2000s. We are actually at a point where Birkenstock actively works together with renowned labels and designers. And now we're in the 2010s. And this is now also the time where we have, for the first time, Birkenstock being run by non-family members. So Birkenstock Group was established in 2013. Now there were two co-CEOs, Markus Bensberg and Oliver Reichert. They took over the European business. David Kahn actually taking over the US business. And until 2013, from 1773, the company was run by people from the Birkenstock family. Now, at this point in time, 2013, it was the first time that outsiders took over the business. And they did change quite some stuff, actually. So they started to do closed, like they first already did closed shoes. So closed shoes was something that was done before, not only sandals, but they diversified into beds, mattresses, pillows, and blankets, and skincare. Something that they were very, like, it wasn't easy. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was very nicely possible to also use the company's strategy and values in quality and health and ergonometric design. Yeah, these values were actually possible to translate into these other businesses. And yeah, finally, in 2021, the family sold the majority stake of the company to a private equity firm, El Cateran. And this private equity firm
is owned by LVMH, yeah.
Exactly. So owned by LVMH, the luxury conglomerate of Arnault, Bernard Arnault. So you may know brands like Dior, Louis Vuitton, like luxury brands are all under the umbrella of LVMH.
Yeah, it's fascinating. If you haven't heard of LVMH, just really you don't even have to pause. Just open your web browser and type in LVMH and go other images. And you can see all the brands that they own, and you will be surprised. Let's say you will be surprised, definitely.
A bit like when we did the glasses episode. I can't remember the brand now. Warby Parker. Yeah. We were talking about
Luxottica.
Yeah, Luxottica. You're like, that's wild that all these brands are under that same umbrella. It's a real surprise.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Yeah. So only one chapter left, which is now 2023. company going public, right?
Yep.
Traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Am I right?
Yep.
That sounds weird. Is it? Yeah, it is
It
New
is,
York. Yeah, interesting story, right? From 1773 up to 2023, going from like one cobbler shop into stable family business, into private equity held company, into now a public company. Also with a lot of, let's say, interesting steps in the company history. And while all that happened that I talk now about, there are, let's say, three things for me that stood out, like that completely stood out, and that I also think made the company successful and brought the company to where it is now. So the first one, and I think we already discussed that from the very get-go, because that's the most obvious one, that they, throughout the whole history, apparently stayed true to their values of comfort, quality, and sustainability. So with all their high fashion attention, they never sacrificed that. And all their products, if it's shoes, sandals, beds, or skincare, they all speak the same language of comfort, quality, and sustainability. All of what they are doing is built to last, as we already discussed, the modularity and the ability to repair, even if it's just a sandal. They are focusing on natural materials from the start, right? This 1913 invention of this flexible footbed made from cork and latex, still the same thing, and it's still natural material. And they were also pioneers of sustainability before it was even a thing, like with 1988, I think, introducing environmentally friendly glue to glue together their insole with the outer sole. 1919, trying to actively reduce the energy consumption in their production. So all of that, being true to these values, comfort, quality, and sustainability, I think what that created with this group of diehard fans, like just people who are actually believing what Alen, you cited from the annual report, that it's not only a shoe, it's a way of life.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, but at the same time, I think we said that also about other companies, right? Staying true to their values for a very long time. That's also something that we said about Muji, for example.
Yeah, but
So,
the thing there is, like, in order to be durable as a company, you need to pick a value that either gets amplified or at the very least like stays a value also for the people. Because if you pick a wrong value, or a value that turns out to be, oh, actually this is not valuable to us as humans, then the whole company gets into a denial. And I think here, also for Muji and for Birkenstock, I think the interesting part here is they focused on a deep value that, yeah, it's a value that it isn't supposed to change. Like, it's health, it's good quality, it's things that should stay through regardless of whatever happens around you. And it reminds me of this quote from Jeff Bezos, which is like, we focus on not trends, but we focus on things that do not change. Like, while every other shoe company probably focuses on trends, like, oh, this is now the new look and this is how this needs to look like, Birkenstock is like exactly the opposite. Its whole company is focused on the thing that's not going to change, which is ergonomics. Yeah, it might slightly change if also in general human feet change, right? But still, like, ergonomics is a value that should stay true even 500 years from now.
Yeah, true.
Unless you're into barefoot shoes, which is the other end of the sort of belief spectrum when it comes to foot health, but that's a, you know, reasonably recent product innovation, I guess, compared to just shoes. You touched on Jeff Bezos. I don't know if either of you are going to touch on the Amazon decision that they made.
I will.
I'll leave it there.
Cool. Yeah, actually, it's part of the next point. For me, what I found super interesting is that they own a huge part of the value chain. Like they're
95%.
95%.
Yeah, that's in the
So
document.
weirdly vertically integrated, backwards and forwards. So they have their own production to start with, right? They actually ramped up production in the 1990s, where many companies started to outsource production from Germany to save costs. Birkenstock used the opportunity of the fall of the Iron Curtain to expand in their production within the now reunited Germany. So 1990s was a big, let's say, production focus, and that's where they invented a lot of their own machines of how to industrialize their production, but still keeping a lot of the as we said, 50 hands that are still necessary to make this. So to this day, they produce everything in-house, and to this day they produce everything in Germany. Is that correct, Alen? Did you see the same data in the reports?
Most of the stuff is done in Germany, apart from the cork. So the cork comes from Portugal, because that's just where.
No, I mean production of the shoes.
Yeah, shoes. I think it's just Germany. I think it's 5 big ones. Yeah, German-centric production footprint. 100% done in EU, but it doesn't say if it's just Germany. Yeah. But it's definitely EU only.
Then the next one is the cork, right? So it's not only that they are using European cork and leather, it's also that they grow their own cork. I didn't find numbers of how much of their cork they grow themselves, but they do grow their own cork. So it's not only production, but it's also vertically integrated to some raw materials. Then forward integration, they run their own stores. I don't know the actual number, but I found something about 54 stores.
Yeah.
That's definitely not something that is responsible for all their revenue, but 55 stores gives you a lot of control of your experience with customers. It gives you a lot of data from customers. So that's definitely an upside. They were one of the first ones to sell online in 2001. They basically opened an online channel, and 2016, as Tom said, they decided to unlist from Amazon because of privacy concerns and counterfeit problems. So all of these steps basically just boosted their standing within the community. It gives them control over the quality. So again, amplifying their value of quality. It gives them also control over cost. Might be more costly than producing and sourcing outside, but still gives them control over cost, and gives them a lot of control over the customer experience. So Alen, I'm already curious to learning more about the own channels versus third-party channels share of sales. I don't know if you got that, but I would be super interested in that. But having your own online sales and being one of the first ones to do own online sales, plus having 54 stores, definitely gives you a lot of control over the experience customers have with your brand, but also a lot of data from how people like your product, how people work with your product, how people experience your product, being able to make these tiny adjustments that Birkenstock is still making, even though not changing their core models.
Roughly 40% direct to consumer.
40%?
40%. Yeah. It was only 18% in 2018. But now they ramped it up. It doesn't have, I didn't find the split of like online versus brand stores.
Yeah.
But it's 40% that's direct to consumer, which is pretty good.
That's crazy. I didn't think that was true for like 54 stores. Isn't
It's actually 45. So I mean, I found
Ah.
45. Maybe it's just you wrote it differently, but
Maybe.
it's still like, yeah, it's 50-ish stores that they own.
Yeah.
Which is and 20 of them are from in Germany. So I'm guessing that most of the other ones are in US.
I read that only 2 are in US.
2.
Yeah, but maybe that's old data.
Yeah. So I mostly went through the 2023 data from September when it went to the US stock exchange. But I'm gonna double check while you move on.
Cool. Yeah, last one.
20.
What
Yeah.
else?
Just confirming it's 20.
20 what?
In Germany. Yeah.
Okay,
Stores.
cool. So for me, the most astonishing thing about this company is how they're able to appeal to customers on completely different spectrum. So it seems almost like this is like Schrödinger's brand, being fashion and not fashion at the same time. Like if you go on their website, one main menu point is professional. Like it's healthcare workers, it's hospitality, it's utility. If you read through this website, the communication is completely utilitarian. It's about comfort, safety, resistant upper materials, high traction, being anti-static. That's one part of their like main website, main menu. And right next to that, there is the 1774 signature collection that features collaboration with Tekla and Dior. Like how is this possible that you have like you click 1 centimeter left and you see shoes that only, and now I'm saying this positively, caregivers would wear, and then you click 1 right and you see shoes that general public have trouble wearing because it's too high fashion.
It's
So
a wonderful juxtaposition. I love that. I think that's. I don't know how much that professional angle would be a positive for someone who's like Gen Z buying them because they're like super trendy at the moment. I doubt that's a dimension they're caring about, but I admire the fact that the brand, you know, gives such prominence still to the professional market.
yeah.
I feel like it's not really the same as Crocs. I mean, Crocs are so popular in like the caregiving world, right? Like nurses, doctors, and stuff like that. So from a practical perspective, there's sort of similarities. And then obviously, again, very fashionable, doing lots of like high level collabs and things like that. So yeah, don't know do we know what have you already mentioned the split between like the professional market and the sort of consumer market? They probably don't publish that, but I imagine it's a pretty small percentage that's not, you know, consumer fashion.
I did not come across this, but I'll have a look while you go on and see if I can find it.
I was just thinking about how is this possible? Like, how can you be a brand that is, I guess, maybe has like a very solid revenue by focusing on professions, and at the same time likely being able to get growth through getting more fashionable by the day and by the collaboration. So I think the first points, they definitely help, like being this authentic brand that stays true to their values. I think that appeals to both. That appeals to your traditional professional customers, but it also appeals to like fashion customers, because that's what's now appealing also in fashion, having a brand that is true to your values. Also, the second point of like being vertically integrated, I think it helps, but honestly, I think nobody cares how integrated you are in your value chain. Nobody really cares. That's more a business.
Yeah. People who listen to this probably care, but yeah,
that's true. I think most important here is that they did everything over these like long-term perspective, withstanding the temptation of fast growth, like really being organic and very controlled about their way of growing, and kind of naturally implying a limited availability. So the fact that they're still producing their stuff in-house leads to limited production. You would definitely be able to grow more rapidly if you outsource production, if you work together with like external companies. Wanting to control the value chain, wanting to control where your cork comes from, where your leather comes from, that is also a constraint on the availability of your product. So you don't want to push your product more than what you actually know you're able to produce, keeping your own values. So I think by the way of how they did business with owning the whole value chain, they put a limit to growth on themselves, because it's just not possible to grow super fast if you own the whole value chain and if you work with natural material and if you want to control where this material comes from. The same is true for like collaboration, right? They did have the chance to collaborate with, for example, Supreme, like one of the biggest like brand names also for younger generation, and they turned down this collaboration, saying, well, that will really help us. We can't grow as fast. This is not values that we want to be linked with. One of the CEOs actually said that this feels like prostitution. Don't want to do this. So don't really comply with the way he put it, but it just like again shows how they think about fast growth. And instead, I think they made just very smart product and portfolio decisions in order to be able to appeal to different customers. Like they were still having their old silhouettes, but then launching more affordable products, like all these rubber-made products with a completely colorful line that definitely helped. Also being, let's say, attractive to a new line of or a new group of customers. Keeping, I think, all the products unisex is also one thing that helped them to be attractive to to the whole spectrum of customers, and never messing with the core of like being quality first and comfort first. And I think that's what's contributing to that.
Yeah, I think that they've been very smart on the collaboration front in particular, particularly the last few years or so. The Supreme one sort of jumped out to me because really could have made big splash in the streetwear world if they'd gone for that. Ironically, they had, I mean, one of the first things that signaled to me this kind of youth popularity around the brand was a collaboration they did with Fear of God. I would say more, maybe slightly more niche sort of streetwear brands, definitely more kind of minimal aesthetic, and they kept them more scarce. But, you know, not that different to Supreme, but I can understand in their mind, like Supreme is all this kind of hype beast, you know, people queuing up, like lots and lots of drops. Something goes in fashion and very quickly out of fashion with Supreme. So yeah, although they're both streetwear, they were really clever with choosing like appropriate streetwear brands. There's still that desirability with someone like Fear of God, like big time, probably cooler than Supreme these days. So yeah, again, like super, super smart decision making.
So yeah, we talked a lot about today, like they have this 250-ish years of history. So how big did I get in 250 years? Let's play a little bit of the guessing game again. We didn't play it in the last one. So again, we're gonna compare Birkenstock with 3 different shoe makers, shoe companies. And you, Franz and Tom, you will guess, does either Birkenstock or the other company have more revenue, yearly revenue? All right, the first one, just as an appetizer, was warming up, is Birkenstock versus Nike. Which one has more revenue?
I think the swoosh may be Franz. What do you reckon?
Nike has more revenue.
For sure. Yeah. So Nike has $49 billion or had in 2022, $49 billion dollars in revenue. So just to get the feeling for what big means in this space. Okay?
From shoes or from
No, this is in total.
49 billion.
Yeah, 49 billion. Now let's get a little bit more into the sphere of Birkenstock. So does Birkenstock or Crocs have more revenue?
I'm going to go with Crocs on this one. I just feel like typically more affordable, has been on a similar wave recently, so it's not like its popularity's waned. I just see more of them around. But yeah,
I say Birkenstock.
Birkenstock. Okay, why?
Just for the fun of it, and because I think they are big and have higher prices. So I hope that goes into revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can argue both ways. Because of the higher price, you can say it's higher revenue, but because of the higher price, you can say it's lower quantity, volume. But yeah, the answer is Crocs, $3.5 billion in 2022. And I think it's mainly for the reason because Crocs was more aggressive earlier than Birkenstock. Birkenstock is only now entering this like slightly more aggressive growth. But I'll talk this in a bit. And lastly, does Birkenstock have more revenue than Dr. Martens?
Birkenstock.
Yeah, got to be Birkenstock, definitely. Don't feel like DMs are anywhere near as popular as they used to be.
Yeah. Fortunately, you're both wrong. It's
Fudge.
very, very close. So
Okay.
2022 numbers, Dr. Martens, 1.25 billion. Birkenstock, 1.24 billion.
Razor
yeah.
thin. And
Razor
This
thin,
crazy.
only
1.2 billion.
4 billion. Yeah.
Yeah.
1.24 billion versus 1.25 billion. So this is going into your notes, Franz, the next time. You're keeping track of all the
I'm keeping track.
Yeah.
So the closest one that we had was Sonos. 1.7.
1.7. Okay.
Like,
and how much was Oatly?
They were on track to 1 billion, remember? They're
okay.
like they had like 800 something.
Okay. Franz got million. A spreadsheet. You got a spreadsheet now. That's good.
No, I just have like on top of my podcast note, I have a collection of market cap and revenue of companies.
Nice. Just wanted to touch on the price thing, actually. I don't know if either of you were surprised that I was really surprised that Birkenstocks aren't more expensive than they are, given particularly the fact that they're made in the EU. You can pick these up for like 60, 70, 80 bucks for an Arizona with all that 50 hands touching it, the sustainable materials. I guess a lot of that is the fact that they own a lot of the value chain, but I was really surprised.
Me too. And what I was even more surprised by is their gross profit margin. This is becoming a recurring theme, is like going into the gross profit margin. So just as a reminder, so Aesop had 90%, which was unbeatable. Crazy. We talked about Monotype, which also has unbelievable gross margin because it's a digital product that they're selling, 80%. We talked about Oatly, physical product, 11%. Do you want to take a guess at gross profit margin of Birkenstock? So having not such a high price, I agree with you, Tom, having 50 hands touching it, having a complete value chain that does everything in-house, mostly produced in the EU, exclusively produced in the EU, mostly in Germany. What is the gross profit margin of Birkenstock?
All of your intonation suggests that it's going to be much higher than I would expect. See, I would have expected it to be around 10 to 15%, maybe 20%, something like that. Okay. But it's going to be higher, isn't it? Franz, do you know, or are you going to have a guess?
You're muted, Franz.
I'd say 40. I don't know.
Yeah. So iPhone has 44. Birkenstock has 60. 60.
60.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
Yeah,
a
I
real
was
surprise to
surprised.
me.
There is
Mm.
only one kind of business LVMH invests in.
Exactly. I mean, this is a typical LVMH
Yeah.
purchase. It's unbelievable. They always buy very old, usually European companies, mostly French, now also German company, with extremely high gross profit margins, which means a company has brand power to charge up, to price up their products. They're very durable. This is a typical LVMH purchase. Yeah.
I feel like these things could be easily 30-40% more expensive, just based on the attributes that we've discussed. So yeah, hopefully they don't start taking the mick.
No, I don't think they. I mean, it is a highly, highly competitive market. The shoe market is one of the most competitive markets. There is pressure from newcomers. There is pressure from the big players in the industry. It's very fragmented. There's a lot of companies. There's a lot of counterfeits coming. And I was trying to find data on like how is Birkenstock actually defending its footbed technology, and I couldn't really understand how it's done because I think the patents also, you can't renew them indefinitely, as far as I understand. So I don't know exactly how this is done. So this is one of the big threats they have, but we'll talk about threats in a moment.
I
But
had
did
the
you
same
find anything
question
about
about
this?
this.
Oh yeah.
No, I had the same question because I was like, like this product was introduced, like the foot sole was invented in 1913 and the Arizona was invented in like 1973, and it's still the same thing. And then they pull out of Amazon because of counterfeit. I mean, obviously you'll be counterfeited if you're a product that works. So the way they talk about it is that this mix of latex and fine versus not so fine cork in this insole is a similar level secret as the secret recipe of Coca-Cola.
Okay.
They didn't mention Coca-Cola, but on their website they say of the biggest American soda maker. So that's how they try to defend it, saying, well, we have the recipe, nobody else has the recipe.
Okay, that makes sense. I thought that it's also partially because of the value chain that they own, and it probably is, because they do own most of it. So that makes sense. But yeah, their financials are very, very healthy. I mentioned most of the numbers I found also throughout the episode by contributing to the other parts of the discussion. But maybe one other part that we can go deeper into here is like what happened since the family gave the reins of the company to the outsiders. So Franz, you said in 2013 we had the first outside CEO, who is still the CEO of the company, take over. And in 2014, the company had 290 million in revenue, and now it has 1.24 billion. So this means they had the biggest, basically most of the revenue, so most of the growth came in the last 8-9 years since the outsiders took over the company and are just more aggressive with growth, more aggressive with approach to opening the stores and so on. And so from 2014 to 2022, the company grew 20% year over year. And I wanted to compare this with some other companies in this space. So Lululemon has also in the same time frame, 2014 to 2022, 20% year over year growth. Crocs had 13% and Nike had 7%. So Nike, it's obviously less because it has had much bigger base that it grew from. It was roughly 30 billion and now it's 50 billion. And Lululemon and Crocs are kind of in a similar spot, or were in a similar league as Birkenstock. And this tells us that 20% is really, really good for this kind of company, because it's hard to grow from this base, like doubling or tripling like some startups do when they're small. So 20% year over year is amazing. And you can see what happens if you do grow 20% year over year for just 8 years. You go from 300 million to 1.25 billion. So that's hard to sustain. Yeah, that's very impressive. So that's why company decided to go public in 2023. So that's an interesting story, what happened there. So company went public, and the initial asking price was $46, but the market opened at 41, which means straight from the get-go, there was a 10%, even more than 10% drop in the stock price, which is not great. So usually what happens when you have an initial public offering is you have a sharp, in most cases, in most well anticipated IPOs, there's a sharp increase in the price. And that also speaks about the current or the position of the market and the economy at that moment. And here we had a sharp decline of 12%, which is not great. And now the price of the stock is $39. So yeah, it's a little bit even went down even a little bit deeper. So I was trying to understand why has this happened, because the company is pretty successful, growing pretty well, has a very good profit margin. It has very clear ways to grow. As we said before, 90% of its revenue coming from US and Europe. So it means almost nothing is happening in China and India, which are arguably the biggest markets. So there's a lot of room for growth. So I had a look at some other IPOs that happened around the same time. For example, Instacart and Klaviyo also basically had IPOs recently, and they were down almost 20%. So we could say that Birkenstock, by being down only 12-ish, 13-ish percent, actually is doing pretty well at the moment. And this is just a reflection, not of the company, just of the current state of the economy, high interest rates, and so on. So most of the investors just prefer to invest in high growth tech, or maybe more stable tech companies like Meta, Google, and so on. And just to give one more data point, Allbirds, so another big company in this space, so the US shoemaker Allbirds, went public also some time ago. They started at $50. Now it's less than $1.
Yikes.
Yeah, so they lost 99% of the value. So I think you may remember from Warby Barker episode, one of the other episodes, maybe it was Oatly even, that if you have a few consecutive weeks of being below $1, then you're delisted from the stock market, stock exchange. So yeah, not the best news for Allbirds, but then just to put in perspective, Birkenstock, even with this decline in the stock price, it's still doing pretty good, I would say.
Yeah. One thing that I also found super interesting was that the valuation that we had now is like, it was like there was a decline of what, 11% on day one,
12,
but the valuation
13.
was 7.3 billion, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Just 2 years ago, the company was valued at 4.3 billion, right? So 2021, they were sold from family ownership to this private equity firm for 4.3 billion, and only 2 years later they are valued at 7.3.
The thing that's not clear though is like what percentage LVMH or El Caterton bought. So yeah, the purchase price reportedly was around 4 billion, but I didn't find the exact percentage. The majority stake.
So if
It
they
could be that
didn't,
it was just 55%, and then basically the company is still worth the same.
yeah, that's true.
So we're not clear on that. But yeah, super interesting story. And I think this leads us nicely into buy, sell, hold. This is not an investment advice. This is just for entertainment purposes, but we'll play a game now where we will each decide whether we would buy, sell, or hold Birkenstock's stock.
Franz, you should go first.
I don't know if they can keep this momentum with growth. So I think the ability to be this like completely this brand that appeals to two completely opposite target groups is only possible by limitation. So that's what we also concluded, right? So some kind of natural limitation made them the company they are right now. So this is why I think it's rather a time to sell than to buy.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I think the whole company's ethos is based on being limited and not being mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And now the company, to be successful on the stock market, you need to get mainstream by definition. You need to grow. You need to please shareholders. And I think that's for some companies that works. You want to be hip, and that basically also backs up your whole story. But I think the story and the ethos and the values that Birkenstock built does not go well together with this new ownership model and with what this actually needs to be successful.
Interesting. Yeah, good rationale.
I echo those thoughts about. I think it's a bit of a shame that they've gone public. Really, I understand why. I completely understand all the pressures to do that and the opportunity, but yeah, it's but it is what it is. I think they will be clever enough to be able to evolve and find that wider market share. I would be buying, and a lot of that would be head. I think there may be waves that they go through, like everything fashion-wise, but they are pretty enduring. I think you'll still get a pretty healthy dividend from them from a profit perspective every year. And from a sort of heart perspective, which obviously you shouldn't take into account when you're making sensible investment choices, their sustainability credentials, really, really admire. But so yeah, I think I would be buying. I wouldn't be expecting enormous things from it necessarily, but I've got faith that they'll continue to deliver. What about you, Alen?
So the thing that makes me unsure is just this recent acquisition from the private equity firm family sold the majority stake to El Caterton, which is essentially LVMH, which has proven to be a good manager of brands, and that is managing these brands with this longevity in mind. So on the one hand, that gives me a certain hope that they will know what to do with this brand. If anyone knows how to deal with these brands, it's them. At the same time, I would probably be even more happy if it still was family owned, because then you would have this stability and you would know how it would be run. But in either case, I would be more on the buy side than sell side, because LVMH knows how to keep this balance of keeping something, of not giving too much of something to the market and still growing, which means usually finding new markets. And in this case, we have a company that is basically unrepresented completely in China and India, and even in certain categories like kids market. So I think there's still a lot of room to grow there. So I would go and be on the buy side. That's my point.
Again, not financial advice, but
that's a good one. So I wasn't sure, China is always an argument, not being there and having the opportunity to go there. But you got me at children's market, because I think this brand would be great in the children's market,
especially new, colorful,
spot on.
Yeah. You were just 2 decades too early, Franz. So
no, I don't mean preschooler. I don't mean primary schoolers. I mean, dad's buying for their babies.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Like the whole
Especially,
family wears Birkenstocks. That's like, then you look.
oh God, imagine. Yeah. So this is I found this really really rewarding one to learn about. I think out of all the brands that we've sort of researched, this is one where I went in with very low expectations and have come out admiring them enormously. There aren't that many that we do that for. Kind of feels kind of Aesop-esque from my perspective.
Yeah.
What about both of you? What have you kind of come away with? What's been your biggest kind of takeaway from them as a business and a brand?
For me, like it's this importance of survival. So a lot of the business, it's, oh, let's grow, let's find new ways to grow. But then it seems that survival is even more important, a combination of survival and being built on a healthy, sustaining value. If you just do these two things, you will have a lot of very, not a lot, but you will have a few moments in a company's story where something positive, unexpected will happen that will take you on a new trajectory. And if you are then organically able to take those opportunities and run with them, you can become a very good, stable, strong business instead of artificially trying to create demand, huffing and puffing all the way up until your first billion and things like that. It's one of those stories that's like a different way to run a company that should be inspiring to many of us and to our children's, because that's the only way to build it is to pass it over to your kids. No, I'm joking, but like it really is like a inspiring story, I think, of a combination of longevity and being built on enduring values.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For me, the most interesting aspect of some or the brands that are most interesting for me is that that are able to do a stretch and combining two things that are apparently super hard to combine. Like with we had the similar story with Muji, like being a brand that combines, that is kind of in the middle of the market, combining design and combining elegance with good quality and with affordable price. So that was kind of counterintuitive. And the same is true now for Birkenstock, being able to combine being appealing for utility workers and people in the caregiving industry, as well as high fashion. Let me spend $500 on a limited edition of sandals, which then also makes it appealing for like the normal people in between, right? If you are able to create this spectrum of professional up to high fashion, you're also capture people in between. And that was just super inspiring for me, how such counterintuitive stretches are actually possible.
Yeah.
What about you,
absolutely.
Tom?
Yeah, I think just shows just the fact that a lot of the foundational philosophies around building products for repairability and longevity, and that you can build a real strong relationship with customers for a long time based on those principles, are things that people talk about now like they're new, and they've been doing it for decades and decades. So I found that very inspiring. And the fact, I think we've all echoed this, they kind of stuck to their guns of being resisting the temptation to just grow at the expense of that philosophy and those beliefs. And they are very profitable, right? Yeah. It's not like those things are exclusive. You can be profitable and build a business which is not growth first, that is sustainable, that sustainable in a business sense, but also takes sustainability, sustainable materials and processes seriously. So tip my hat to Birkenstock.
Yeah, agree. So they're not just, go ahead.
Sorry, go on. Don't go on.
No, I think we wanted to do the same thing. I think this is a very nice point to conclude this one. Very, very inspiring story. hopefully we can find more of this type. So if you, dear listener, also found this inspiring, there's another thing you might find inspiring, which is our 7-day mini MBA. It's a free email course where over 7 days you receive 7 emails, each of them teaching you one business concept that's relevant for the work of designers. So to sign up for this, head over to d.mba/mini-MBA. So that's d.mba/mini-MBA. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Franz. See you in the next one.
See you.
Bye-bye.